This was the longest movie I've ever, like, this was 100+ days of shooting. That is longer than it took to make a series of Dear White People. So for me to get out of bed, it's got to be personal. And yeah, the personal touch points were kind of uncanny. I worked at Disneyland, like you mentioned, during film school, literally riding the Haunted Mansion and thinking to myself, like, what from this can I take away as a filmmaker? I really did that. I thought the cinema of those rides was so inspiring, and I always would think about, like, how can I incorporate their approach to storytelling, certainly as a theme park ride, but as a filmmaker. I have an incredible desire to bring the history of New Orleans, and specifically Black culture. This is the birthplace of jazz and the best food in the country, and all of our popular cultures come out of this time in New Orleans where Black people and white people and indigenous people and the Spanish and all these people were free. And it was short-lived, but it was long enough to produce this amazing, unique culture. And I love, that's literally on my list, my bucket list of things to bring to life in film. And then at the end of the day, it's Katie Dipple wrote this amazing ensemble comedy, and ensemble comedy, that's how I got in the game, And so it was personal, and I didn't know if I was actually going to be the one that they would choose, but I walked into those rooms and I said the things that I loved about it. I had just made Bad Hair, and so I also fell in love with practical in-camera effects, and that was a big important part of it to me. And I said, I want to build the mansion. I want to shoot as much of it as practically as I can. I want to make it as Black as I can, because that's New Orleans. And I want to, tell this ensemble story that I feel like I know how to do. And luckily, Disney agreed.
How would you characterize your relationship with the 2003 Eddie Murphy one? Because I think from what I've seen, you've been pretty open about it, like not being like a mega fan or anything like that.
I think it was a kid's movie that came out at a time when I was not a kid. It didn't necessarily speak to me, but Eddie Murphy is a comedic genius and Rob Minkoff is a genius. And so, it didn't necessarily speak to me at the time. I think when I started to make this movie, I revisited that movie, and I revisited specifically the production design and some of the research that they did, because I wanted to kind of see what their thinking was, where they sort of fell short of their own. This is not a shade. Happens on every movie. You always fall short of your initial ambition and vision, but sort of figure out what problems they ran into, that kind of stuff. But at a certain point, I had to put that movie aside. I sort of made the conscious decision not to really look too deeply into what Guillermo was planning, and just make the movie that made me say yes to this project, which again starts on the page with Katie Dipple's work. And, for me, includes a bunch of life experiences and personal obsessions and all kinds of that stuff. But that's the lane I kind of stayed in, for this. And yeah, I don't know. I know that we had certain goals on this movie that maybe were different than the goals they had on that movie, for sure.